This is No Bullshit Gaming Podcast, 2.5 Gamers, special SKAN session today. So we are sharing actionable insights, dropping knowledge from our day-to-day user acquisition, game design, and ad monetization jobs. So today it's only day-to-day user acquisition job. We're definitely not discussing latest news, but we are having so much fun. So let's not forget, this is still 4 a.m. conference discussion vibe, so let's not take it too seriously. So again, as I said, this is special SKAN iOS session with Eran Friedman. So as you might notice, I replaced Felix and Jakub with Eran because, well, he's definitely more suitable for any iOS or SKAN discussion. And it's me, Matej Lančarič. So, Eran, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Matej. And I'm happy to join as one of the players there, one of the gamers, and excited to talk about no bullshit insights for SKAN.
Nice. Sure. Yeah, perfect. That's what we need, because we have all the articles out there talking about how SKAN 4.0 is coming. Nobody knows when. Maybe we know already. Let's see. And you are kind of, in the let's call it back channel, because, well, why don't you just give us some quick introduction from your side, who you are, how did you end up in gaming as well? It's always important and interesting to know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so first of all, my name is Eran. I'm the CTO and co-founder at Singular. We started the company almost 10 years ago now.
Nice.
So that's been a while. Started as kind of the first cost aggregation solution in the mobile industry, as we called it originally. And then very quickly, we got into the MMP space. We wanted to kind of build the ultimate unified solution to provide all the UA data from all your networks with all your attribution data, kind of in a single platform. We're ranked just recently in G2 as the #1 product for MMP in the category, and we work with amazing gaming companies like EA and Glue and Riot Games and Rovio and Warner Brothers and many others, of course. And we're kind of putting a big focus on next generation attribution methodologies like SKAN network and privacy sandbox and game mix modeling and all of that jazz. So that's kind of, I guess, where we are today. And you're asking, how did you get to the gaming business? So honestly, I started from kind of the mobile industry in my career. So before Singular, me and my two other co-founders, Gadi and Susan, we all worked at a subscription app, I would say, not exactly gaming, but the consumer app called Unavo. That was way back when this was 2009. So really when the mobile industry kind of exploded. So we kind of saw the challenges around growth and growth data from there. And I think that's what inspired us to start Singular. But yeah, since then we've had customers who are also gaming as part of the Unavo. We had a small B2B business that we're interacting with them, and then we kind of started a new company and wanted to focus on solving growth data challenges, basically. So I guess that's what brought me into the gaming industry.
Nice. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. And so why you are here? So as soon as ATT happened and all these privacy changes happened, Singular was one of the most vocal MMPs out there. So I remember you were always talking about what's happening, just sharing some insights and some knowledge. So this is good. I love it, and I have some really let's call them direct questions, because I read a lot of articles, but I still I'm getting also questions okay, so what should we do? When should we start using the SKAN 4.0? But before we go there, can you just maybe quickly give us some quick state of the iOS, what's happening now? Of course, everybody knows ITT, all this fun stuff, but now, okay, so we need to move from SKAN 3 to SKAN 4. Do you have any maybe timelines or something that you can share? From the background, and also maybe I can ask, after all this iOS fun stuff, just privacy sandbox as well. You mentioned it, so maybe we'll go there. We'll see. But what you are seeing now from the iOS point of view?
Okay, so let's take a quick kind of step back and like understand, okay, what's the state of the industry with iOS at the moment? And you were already familiar with the ATT changes, the lack of IDFA, or the discussions like probabilistic versus deterministic and all that things. And then there's SKAN network. And again, probably everyone is already familiar with the fact that Apple kind of designed SKAN network to work across all iOS users without requiring the ATT pop-up, or without demanding kind of either they give consent or not, doesn't matter. Everything works on SKAN network. And that was kind of the initial, they originally released it like as SKAN network 2.0, like 2 years ago, with a lot of drama, as you've mentioned. And yes, we're pretty, I think, vocal about the need to kind of prepare for it. And they've made changes through time. They've added, like, published new versions and added more features. There's like SKAN 2.1 and then 2.2 and then 3.0. Like, things have evolved since then. And if I kind of fast forward to now, or more specifically to like November of just last year, then suddenly Apple released the new version of SKAN network called SKAN network 4.0, or SKAN 4 in short. It was actually also a kind of a surprise a bit for the industry, because there already kind of gave teasers on, like always with Apple, it's fun. So they're kind of giving teasers on kind of it's gonna happen, SKAN 4, gonna have some new features, but then suddenly out of the blue, they said iOS 16.1 is out, and happy surprise, it includes SKAN 4 in it, and tons of documentation of changes and differences and new features and all of that. So that was just before the holiday season. So it was kind of great, great kind of interesting timing and all of that. So that was kind of, again, November of last year. So then when you ask, okay, so what's the status right now? Right now we're in February 2023. Okay, so what's exactly the status? So the status, first of all, SKAN 4 is out. It's part of iOS 16.1 and above. It's important, of course, to know that because it depends on the OS version, then you need iOS users to update to iOS 16.1 so they have SKAN 4 supported. Already based on kind of the adoption rates that I see.
Let me check what kind of iOS I have at the moment, because I'm always the last to
update.
Of course, 100%. I don't even know what 6.1. Okay, 6.11.
Okay, there you go. So
I guess there you go. Nice.
So yeah, it's definitely growing. Based on our data, we see that roughly 45% of iOS users have 16.1 and above. So it's still not like the masses, but it's pretty main for almost half of the iOS users already have it. Pretty decent, right? So roughly one of every two kind of iOS users would have SKAN 4 built in, and it's increasing like pretty fast. Like from November, it got to 40%. We expected probably in the next 3 months or so, you'll have probably 80% of the users, which is kind of what you usually see in these timelines. So that's kind of one part that you need for SKAN 4 to work. But then, of course, there's multiple endpoints that need to work. There's the MMP side to support all the infrastructure for the advertisers and the measurement. I think by now all the MMPs have released their SKAN 4 support and announced these.
You were also the first one, right? Like, oh well, we are live on SKAN 4.0. But then I was reading the fine print at the end, like, but we are ready. But it's not, the adoption rate is not very big, but we are ready. So as soon as everybody else is ready, you're good.
You're completely right. It's the no bullshit podcast, right? So it's completely right. So we basically announced that was in November, right? Just shortly after it was announced. And honestly, we've been preparing for that kind of release by Apple. So it's not like we suddenly developed everything in 2 weeks. But preparing all the initial things. But yes, you're right that the stages basically means that we have our SKAN 4 SDK that the advertiser can update to be ready for SKAN 4. It doesn't mean that obviously they can run SKAN 4 at scale, because you need all the iOS users to update to SKAN 4, and you need the networks to support SKAN 4. But this was really important for many of our customers, because if you can imagine, I've mentioned some of the kind of brands working with Singular kind of in the past, like Warner Brothers and EA and these. It takes a while for all the studios to update their SDK for SKAN 4, right?
For these big companies, I'm pretty sure, it takes ages to get out with the new SDK.
So it was really good news for them to understand, okay, how they're going to involve it in the release cycles to make sure that once Scan 4 is actually live and like production level, they can be the first ones to kind of test it out, right? I think that was kind of the intention there. And I think if, again, fast forwarding to now from November, now we're actually seeing, so again, not production scale in Scan 4, but we already see live postbacks. Some ad networks are already testing it out, and we're kind of coordinating with them. We have some live advertisers, customers who are working with Scan 4, actually seeing the data, which is pretty exciting, honestly. And, starting to look how it's working in practice, even if tests, but still cool.
Yeah, the question is like, what's the advantage of being the early adopter of all of this? Because it's so complex. It's so complex.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's a good question to ask. Not all of the advertisers, and probably even not most of the advertisers, it would kind of fit for them to kind of be an early adopter and like be a first mover. But again, you kind of in our industry see kind of various types of advertisers. Some say, I have like an existing operation and got it to work in Scan 3 or whatever. I'm not really using Scan, which also happens to say, I prefer not to like test all the new features. I want to wait for things to stabilize. I want to kind of release everything, give it another like 6 months or a year, and then kind of I'll get all the learnings, read all the blog posts, and do what everyone else is doing, right? So that's definitely a legitimate strategy and makes sense for maybe most of the advertisers. But we do have some of our customers who actually love being on the cutting edge of technology, right? They want to be the first ones to test this. They want to get the advantage. We know that there's going to be a learning curve. Like there was a learning curve for the initial versions of Scan, and many were starting for a lot of time. We saw that honestly, the ones who started early got the struggles like everyone else, like trying to figure it out. But honestly, they've now they feel, I guess they got to a better place much, much earlier than others, and they felt it works to their advantage. It means they can, buy IDFA less inventory, which is usually cheaper than IDFA-based inventory, and they feel that they can optimize there, right? Or like do things that others can't do during the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I mean, I'm usually not as early adopter as maybe I would like, but depends on what kind of companies I work with. Of course, if I work with smaller companies, not everybody has the resources and everything to actually crack like what does it mean. So it's like sometimes I'm playing the wait and see game, but so you talk about testing. So is it possible to have Scan 3 in place and then start testing Scan 4 on, let's say, partial traffic?
Yes. So the answer is, first of all, yes. And it's also necessary because we understand that it's going to be a gradual process. You're still always going to have, like, even when Scan 4 reached like mass adoption, you have like 80% users in Scan 4, right? You're still going to have like the 20% in Scan 3. So even during the time, you still need to maintain the Scan 3 models in a sense. Now, Apple was pretty smart about it. They kind of put various kind of backward compatible features in every new features that they've included in Scan 4. So anything there, or like almost everything there, can kind of be equivalent to Scan 3, just like less features in Scan 3 in a way. So we've also designed our solution to basically have parallel Scan 3 and Scan 4, so that if you have a Scan 3 user, everything is going to work based on Scan 3, of course. And if you have a Scan 4 user, then you'll get kind of the additional features for them. Definitely complicates things, but it's probably going to be like that for a while. Yeah.
So that's what I always say to people in gaming industry. Like, it's not going to get any easier. It's going to get even harder these days. It's like, but that's how it is. We just need to adapt. But so we are already kind of comparing Scan 3 and Scan 4. So what's the biggest difference between Scan 3 and Scan 4?
Wow, what's the biggest difference between Scan 3 and Scan 4? So I think there's a lot of things that I'm personally excited about. So there's like several big differences or like features, I would say. So if you think about it, there's like the web to app support, which is really interesting because think about it, like until now they're like UA channels which were heavy from web that couldn't work with Scan, just inventory not coming in Scan or can't be measured in Scan. Like, I don't know, think about search campaigns. like, I don't know, there's like all kinds of, ad networks with heavy search traffic that you can imagine that maybe would be more based from browsers basically and couldn't be measured by SKAN. And it's possible, which is exciting on its own, right? There's features for getting like more granularity, so kind of getting deeper reports. It's for higher scale advertisers, but potentially they can get like ad set level data, maybe creative level data, maybe placement level data. So that's kind of interesting on its own. Just like the course values that we can probably talk about. But the thing that I'm the most excited about, among other features, I think has the biggest potential for being a game changer, is the multiple postbacks. The fact that now for every user, you can get up to 3 different postbacks in different core periods. I think that's the most exciting ones for me.
Okay, so what are the different postbacks, and how does the conversion windows look for these postbacks? Because I was reading all these the first blog, I was like, okay, this is nice, it's great, but then like right now I'm used to see the conversions and postbacks pretty quickly. So we are looking at day 1, so I can see very quickly everything that's happening. This, it kind of extends to fucking eternity almost. So like, how does that look? How does that look like? Because now it's not one only, so that's going to be free, right? So how does it look like?
Okay,
I mean, it's great.
Yeah, but, no, it's So I think if we're kind of questioning, wait, is it a good thing? It's a bad thing. Definitely, there's no question. SKAN 4 is definitely an upgrade from what we had in SKAN 3. But how it actually looks like. So let's talk a bit about like the timer mechanism and like the postbacks and all of that. So until SKAN version 3, you only got a single postback, right, for every attributed user. And if you pass kind of a certain volume, then you also get like a conversion value and all of that. So we're kind of understand like the privacy thresholds and all that. So essentially, if you have a conversion value, then you can ideally calculate like your ROAS for that campaign, right?
Yeah.
So you get kind of that postback, and you can calculate like the encoded ROAS. So if I try to kind of make an example, let's say that a user made a purchase after they installed the app and kind of played the game for a bit, and they made a purchase of like $5, then it's encoded as a conversion value of 5 and included in that postback, and you can calculate your ROAS, which is great. But the big issue, and in my personal opinion, one of the biggest issues in SK network until now was the limited time window. You could only basically, there's like we can get into the technical details, but the standard was to only record what happened in the first day of the game from the first launch, right? So you have 24 hours to see if any users made any in-app purchase, or if they had any signals, meaningful event that makes you predict that they'll probably make an purchase later on, right?
Yeah.
But as we probably all know in kind of the gaming industry, especially for ones who rely a lot on in-app purchase, there's barely any users who would be willing to make a purchase already in the first 24 hours, right? And that's a big problem. That's like a huge problem for SKAN, and I mean for mid-core, for hardcore, for casual. Yeah, majority of games. That's a big issue. So it's true that you get a postback pretty early on, but if you get 90% zeros of like users who didn't make a purchase and then like barely working with others, it's like, how can you understand the true performance of your campaigns, right? So that's been and honestly, I've heard from advertisers who kind of saying, sitting on the fence and saying, I'm not even sure if I should invest in SKAN in general, because I can't really see anything from beyond like 1 day, right? So that was kind of,
always, that's also only like way of looking at things. Obviously, you want to know like what kind of performance you are getting from the campaigns. Well, in these days, especially on iOS, it's not going to be that easy anymore. So maybe it's kind of I'm gonna change my terminology about these things, but then it's kind of, you need to change the way of thinking about the valuation of the iOS campaigns. And of course, like if you can't see, then it's really hard to kind of justify the spend, of course. But then you have different approaches to, to look at things like blended approach. Of course, if you're a small company, money goes in, money goes out. Of course, it's not ideal. It's very far from ideal. But what can you do?
So if you're running, with like 10 channels, right, for a large scale advertiser, now suddenly the blended metrics are more difficult to.
Exactly.
So what can you do? But now that's the big news in SKAN 4, because it's, it feels like, to me, kind of from my perspective, it feels like Apple recognized this issue, and they came up with like a new proposal, and basically said, now you're gonna have 3 specific windows, and they chose the windows themselves. It said first postback, which was kind of interesting. Yes, of course. So it said first postback sent after 2 days with some random there. We can dive into the details. Then second postback after 7 days with some random, and then third postback after 35 days. And those can have a course conversion value themselves. So now if I try to, again, like to look at it, think about it as from a gaming kind of publisher standpoint. Now, literally, if I had any in-app purchase in the first 35 days of playing the game, which sounds more reasonable for many of the gaming companies out there now, then suddenly you can actually include, you can know exactly how many users made a purchase and whether this was high purchases or medium purchases, and really see kind of the, like, D35 RAWs, right? Basically not very different. It's not like I'm saying like D90, but D35
but still, it's not day
one.
It's not day one only.
Exactly. So I think that can be, I know also from speaking with our customers, that makes a huge impact, right, on their analysis. So I think that's kind of the big news there. Of course, as always, like I tend to say, like with SKAN Network, there's always good news and bad news. So the good news are that you're getting 3 postbacks, you're getting 2 days, 7 days, and 35 days. That's great. The bad news are that the second and third postback have much more random to them. So the postback is sent after, if the first postback was, we used to kind of get it between like 1 and 2 days, basically, of random. Now the second and third postback, we can get it after between 1 and 6 days of random. So again, repeating. So if the user kind of made a purchase after 7 days and you get that conversion value, then it can take up to another 6 days until you get that postback, which is pretty insane. But that's what you have to work with.
Yeah, true. So we need to now think about how actionable is this actually for the UA managers, because of course it's not only day one, but then like if I need to wait another like 6 days, well, it's not only 6 days, 12 days, and then another X days to actually see the postback. Well, I need to be able to make decisions very quickly, because I don't want to waste money. I'm pretty sure that you are hearing this from other advertisers as well. So anything that can help you actually lock these windows or the conversion values, or that, because I'm pretty sure that there is something in there. It can't be just doom and gloom only.
For sure, yeah. So there's also the lock-in mechanism that I can dive in a second. But I think if you think for a second about like the UA kind of methodology and practice, and even before like SKAN and IDF, pre-NTT, right? So the good old days, right? Usually you'd start the campaign, you kind of already in the first like few days, probably you'd see like what's the initial performance, right? You look at D1, D2, D3 kind of performance, and kind of make, if you see like it's total crap, like this campaign is like not performing well, you can decide to stop it. If you see that it has some potential, you'll probably maybe make some adjustments, but kind of still monitor, right? You want to see what happens in day 7 and day 30 and so forth, right? So kind of you rely on the first initial indicators to kind of make more real-time decisions or like daily decisions, but still monitor what happens eventually, right, with that campaign. So if we think about it that way, I don't think it's going to be very different now with SKAN 4, because you can imagine you can still rely on the first postback. We're going to talk about even deeper optimization with lock windows. But if I don't change anything, I can check what happened after 2 days. Okay, how much information I got from that? Like how does the initial conversion look like? If I get like, and I see like a full conversion value, I can see the fine conversion value. I see a lot more details there, and say, okay, if that campaign seems to be performing well or not, then you can decide to scale it or not. But then after 7 and 35 days, similar as before, similar as the old days, you can take another look at that campaign for that install date and see, okay, did that campaign really continue to increase? Did the users really make a purchase as I thought that they would? Or did they increase in value as I thought that they would? Kind of validating your assumptions in a way. I think way of that process is still valid in the new days.
It is, but then how the, let's say, reporting changes afterwards? Because now I'm used to see the day one, but then well, yeah, how did that reporting change thanks to the different conversion,
right,
or postbacks?
So think about when we're trying to think about our reporting for our customers and how to make it as easy as possible. Everything is already so complicated, and that
exactly,
so, so we're trying to keep it simple for the customer. So how it would show up in the reporting is what they can see is already, they see the day 2 basically performance, or like the first postback performance, which is essentially day 2, unless you shorten that window. You can see day 7 performance. So you can see day 7 ROAS basically, and then you can see day 35 ROAS, right? So essentially, think about it as like
anything in between, or only day 7 and day 35.
So directly from the postbacks, you can get like the exact window. But if you get a bit more sophisticated, you might be able to see more things in between. And we can talk about the locking windows and all of that. But yeah, so essentially, just to kind of to simplify, you can see kind of the reporting. You see the deep granularity as much as SKAN4 will offer, and then day 2, day 7, day 35. Or saying, wait, but I want to see day 10. That just is an example, right? The day 3, for example. That's honestly more difficult with SKAN today. You can do, what you can do is, one feature that was kind of included in SKAN4, again, one of the hidden surprises, was the locking mechanism, a lock window, which is really interesting and caused a lot of room for discussion and kind of brainstorming in the team and with the media partners out there. So the lock window gives the option for the advertiser to decide that they don't want to wait for the end of the window. And they want to shorten it, like in real time, say, okay, I'm done. I don't need to wait for any more information about the user to send the post back. So just as an example, let's say a use case would be if the user made a purchase, I would regard it as a high value user, just as an example, right? Because I'm looking for the high value user. Now, so if the user made a purchase already in day 10, then I'm going to lock the window and send, no need to wait for day 35. You can already send the post back to the network, right? After 10 days. So the advantage would be that the ad network would get the postbacks earlier on. They don't need to wait 35 days for the third postback. The disadvantage is that it becomes more difficult to understand what's the install date for where this postback belongs, right? So let me kind of try to
Jesus to kind of Christ. Okay, so yeah, as you said, so there's good news and bad news. Fuck's sake. Okay.
Exactly. So if you basically say, yeah, I'm going to send the post back whenever the user made a purchase. So the user can make a purchase anywhere between like day 8 to day 35, right? The third post back. So how do you know that literally you have like a range of like a full month from where the user kind of belongs, right? Which kind of created problems. So I guess my point is there's a lot of potential. There's things that you can do maybe around modeling, which is something that we're heavily investing in, like trying to figure out those things. At the end of the day, we want to provide like the install base, like when did you spend money, and what were your results in as many cohorts as possible, in kind of as real time as possible, with the limitations that exist there, right?
Of course, there are going to be limitations. So a user installs the game today. He or she makes a purchase in, let's say, in the first 24 hours, the first postback. Then this player makes purchase again in 5 days, and then again in 20 days. So how can I track this evolution of his LTV in this like new SKAN 4.0?
Right. So the first thing to kind of keep in mind, we're trying to answer that question, is Apple made it very, very hard to track that specific user and understand, okay, I got a specific user who made these 3 purchases, right?
Yeah.
Instead, they're kind of thinking from the other way around. For this campaign, how many users did you get who made that amount of purchases, right? So if you try to sum up, this is kind of one kind of classic way to approach this, is if you sum up those purchases, 3 purchases within, like you said, like 20 days, sounds like a pretty good user, right? Especially if kind of the first already in the first 24 hours, they already made a purchase. So intuitively, I would mark this as probably a pretty high value user, right? That means, okay, you got a good user there. So probably what I would do is create a model, a schema, conversion model schema, and basically says that, again, if they made more than a total amount of purchases, I don't know if it all aggregates to like more than, I'm throwing out like $10, or if they made more than one purchase, for example, during the time period, we probably mark them as a high value user in the third postback. And if they made also a purchase in the first day in the kind of the second window, then they'll probably be considered a high value user in the first day in the first postback and second postback. So what you'll get in the reporting is you show that you had one install in theory, and they're high value in both like D2, D7, and 35. And you can probably also model the ROAS basically based on that, kind of estimating, okay, how much on average revenue you got from high value users, right? And kind of day 7 and D35. So using some estimations to say, okay, on average, I think because I saw that you had like a one install with like high there, then probably the DROAS there is, I don't know, like that, 10%, like 30% or whatever. Exactly. So it
60%. Let's be more positive. 60%.
Sure. Yep, exactly.
Okay, so how do you tag
expect based on the
how do you tag those players? Like you said, like I would say this is a high value player. Okay, so how would I do that?
So what you would usually do is like create a schema in like your MMP, like Singular, and kind of say, okay, so so again, high value users are equal kind of that. If a user made more than that range of value, then I would consider a high value user. That's encoded kind of in the conversion value. And then you see from this specific campaign, okay, I got the number of high value users, and that means that the ROAS is 60%. Now you can try to make decision about that campaign. Is it hitting your target? Do you expect that 60% a good value? To me, it sounds pretty good for that range. Then you can consider, okay, let's continue scaling this campaign. Looking good, right? But if you see that they're not hitting the target, you're barely seeing, maybe you didn't see any high value user, okay, seems like something isn't working there, right? And you should probably kind of consider like other levers to optimize. So that's kind of the level of thinking I can imagine.
Yeah, okay. So can I have like different conversion schemas for different postbacks then in the 4.0?
How does definitely it work? Yes.
How does it work?
So just to make things more complicated, of course.
Exactly.
So you actually have 4 different schemas if you think about it, because you have for the first postback, you can get either a fine conversion value, which is the type of conversion value that we have today, the famous number between 0 and 63. So that's supported only in the first postback. So you'll probably keep the same model that you have today for SKAN 3. That's probably going to be the fine conversion value for SKAN 4 for the first postback. But then you can also configure a coarse conversion value schema for the first postback. So for people who are less familiar with all the blog posts about SKAN 4, kind of the new type of conversion value that has more limited information, not the famous number between 0 and 63, but just basically a string, just low, medium, or high, just 3 options. So basically, if you don't pass certain thresholds, the privacy thresholds, basically to get the fine conversion value, you might still be able to get the coarse conversion value. So that's another model that you can potentially configure in the first postback. So you need to think about, okay, so in the first 2 days of the user, like understanding how to map these 2 numbers, and also how to map these to low, medium, and high. So that's kind of the second schema that you need to configure. And then for the second and third postbacks, you also need to configure 2 additional schemas. What's considered a high, medium, low value user after 7 days, and what's considered a high, medium, low user after 35 days, which might be different mechanisms, right? You might say that if a user made a $10 purchase within 7 days, they're considered high. But if they didn't make any other purchases by day 35, maybe you'd say that they're a medium value user, right? So it might be different rules based on the different time windows that you have.
Okay, so let's say I have the same conversion schema. Let's use the revenue schema. So first 63 bits, it's all revenue brackets. Then for the first postback, I have another brackets for, let's say, low, medium, and high. So I can go from, I don't know, let's call 64 to whatever, 200, because I know that in the next 7 days from the day one, players can spend anything between $60 and $200. And then from 7 days to 30 days, they can spend another $500. So I can put all the brackets here from, let's say, 60 to 500.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's definitely one possible schema that you can definitely configure. There's more. There's like tons who can easily spend like an hour and like conversion model optimizations. But I'll give you like an example. So if you think about it, again, in the course side, usually there's we see that there's a huge effect of whether the user actually made any purchases versus they didn't make it all. Because obviously in gaming, like most users don't make any purchases. Right? So kind of recommended practices, I would say, is that like this is a big factor. Like it's more, it affects more whether they even made a purchase or not, rather than kind of what's the exact amount that they made. So I would say probably as a default, you would say that if the user didn't make any purchases, assuming you were talking only about revenue here, then you're probably considered low, and they'll probably be low. Like also, it's going to be pretty consistent after 7 days, after 35 days, low value users, and that's probably most of the users that you're going to get. Right? Didn't make any purchases, they're a low value user. And then on the revenue ranges, okay, so how do you split? Like, let's say the user made a purchase. How do you decide if they're a medium or high? Then that kind of depends a bit on how you regard, usually if I try to think about it, the high is kind of reserved to the whale users in a sense, or like the really high value purchase users. And you can probably create like sort of like a distribution kind of metric. You see like, how many purchases do you usually get per user, and kind of try to split it somewhere in which you regard, okay, if I get, just like, I'm just throwing a number, but if you get like a very low number of high value users, but they know, that they're very high value, it means that you probably want to continue spending on that campaign. So you need to kind of think about what's that number that makes you confident that, okay, wow, I'm getting some pretty high value users here. It's worth like working more with that campaign. It might be that $100 revenue. It might be like a $50 revenue. Of course, depends on the vertical and all that, right?
Sure. Of course, that depends on the genre of the game as well. Okay, so in that case, like how that influences the campaign optimization on the UA channel side. Because now I'm used to see, let's talk about Facebook. So I'm sending all the purchases from the day one into the Facebook with the value, and then I'm pretty sure to see that as soon as I send as many events as possible, the campaign gets more events, more data points, and it kind of optimizes better. But it's day one only. So if I'm going to send the day 7 or day 30, like how that's going to change the whole optimization on the campaign side?
Yeah.
Are you already talking about that with the channels?
Oh yeah. We're talking with all of them. Man, there's a lot of conversation there because it's a really difficult problem, right? They're like they're also trying to like figure out how are they going to update on their optimization techniques. But I think, again, the good news is that it's not like there's some nuances on like the timers and the things that have changed, but they're still going to get the same first postback as they used to get. So in terms of like the current optimization, it seems like it's not going to remove things. Things are only going to get better because now, besides the optimization by the first postback, suddenly they can get more information later on, of course, that kind of reaffirms if they're on the right direction or not, right? So if I had to guess, and I think every media channel has their own kind of strategies for optimization. They're trying to, everyone is saying we have to test it at scale. We have to see how the data looks like and all of that. There's tons of still questions on how it's going to work at scale. But I think the common kind of way of thinking is we can keep for now still optimized by the first postback as exists today. But now we're going to get a bit more signal on, later on how did we truly perform. And everyone has like their own kind of, prediction algorithms trying to understand from the initial signal whether they're going to perform or not. Now we kind of have like this validation, right? After 7 days or after 35 days, if you're really right, if it really looks like it, you got it right. And I think that's probably going to be like the first phase, still optimizing by the first signals, but getting a bit more information to see if you're right or wrong. And from there, we'll see how they can innovate and kind of update their optimization accordingly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It took only like almost eternity for the UA channels to actually adapt to what's happening on the iOS side. So it's going to be very interesting. But I'm looking forward. I'm always very optimistic about any change in terms of the iOS. But how can developers actually prepare for this? Like anything for those that updated the SDK, but should they do anything on their end? Anything else? Any checklist or anything that we go through? It's like, okay, so I need to do this, and that, and then I'm fine. I'm well prepared.
Yeah. So there is a checklist. So let's think about it for a second. So first of all, yes, you need to update the SDK. That's the most important thing. And you don't have to do it like literally like today, like shout at everyone.
Yeah,
to the SDK. You just need to make sure it's part of your plan to prepare, right? So and it's usually those release cycles and making sure that it's somewhere in the backlog of your dev team. So that's the most important thing. So once any UA channel says, "Oh, we have SKAN 4 support," then you can test it out finally.
Yeah, you're good to go.
So that's number one. Okay. Exactly. The second thing that you can already kind of prepare things is think about, this is more planning. So think about how do you want to leverage both the course conversion values, again, how do you define the low, medium, and high users, and the multiple postbacks. So how would you define those users for each one of those time windows? It's as if you need to create 3 new schemas. You already had to think about one schema. Now you need to prepare a plan. What do you think are the next kind of 3 other schemas? Now, I get a lot of questions from like advertisers, like what should be like the best core schema for me? I have no idea. And it's obviously something that we've put a lot of thought around. And basically our product offers kind of out of the box schema. So you can keep your same SKAN 3 model that maybe you've iterated and got to something that you feel really confident about, and kind of click a button or like upgrade to SKAN 4, and we'll have our suggestion for course conversion values for our 3 models. So you don't need to like obsess about like what's the right schema. You have something already available that's kind of aligned with your SKAN 3 model. So if, for example, you're at a revenue model, then most likely you want to keep a revenue model for the other course values, for example, right? So with kind of these practices in mind. So again, if you kind of want to be more, I don't know, like you want to think about it more, you want to plan more for it, you can think about that question if you want to customize that the schema. But if you prefer that, to start with something and then see from there, you can just choose the out-of-the-box models. So that's kind of I guess the second part of like the checklist, like plan your course convert your schemas basically. Yeah. Then the third part, again, if you want to be like the first mover, like early adopters, is you can actually speak with your media partners, right? Just ask how they're doing with the progress towards SKAN 4. Now, we speak with all the partners. Each one are in their own kind of process. Some of them have beta programs already that some of our customers are using and testing side by side. Others are taking it more slowly. So it really depends on the media partner. But if you're working with someone, you're spending a lot there, you can ask them, when are they planning to be ready with SKAN 4? Maybe they will tell you, know what, we actually already have a beta program. We'll be happy to test it out.
Let's try it out.
You.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So that's kind of, I guess, the initial checklist that I would.
Okay. No, it's going to be a lot of fun, I guess. Well, as you said at the beginning, I guess it kind of still is like 3 months out until like 80% of the users is actually having the 16.1 iOS. Yep. So there is some time. But I guess the thing is, like, I guess you're never going to be like 100% prepared for what's going to happen.
You're right.
And honestly, I tried like so many conversion schemas before. It's just like I was trying to be the early adopter, and it took a long time until I figured it out. So now I'm in that like wait and see kind of mode. But it's already, I guess, time to start looking into things. Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, I think it's a very valid strategy to kind of wait and see. But it depends on, again, many are trying to use that as an opportunity to get an advantage early on and kind of create the expertise. Nobody really knows how it's going to work like the SKAN 4.
I know.
So if you feel that you want to kind of take the leap, and yes, you probably need to iterate and kind of try to learn it and make mistakes for sure. But you'll kind of gain maybe like a 6 months advantage over everyone else and be able to use that in your campaign strategy, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty. Of course, and I still see some bigger and smaller companies. They don't even run any iOS UA because it's hard. We can't even evaluate. Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you very much. Yeah. Please don't do that. At least it's less competition on iOS.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess
it's really painful for me to hear. Yeah, these cases. I hear. Yeah, we just gave up on iOS. You're not going to spend there, but yeah, it's just leaving room for the others to take what's
that's
there.
The thing. Like those iOS whales and payers, they didn't disappear. They're still there. Of course, it's kind of hard to get them to play your game, but SKAN 4 could definitely help.
I agree.
So you mentioned at the beginning that you might be able to see some ad set level data, some creative level data, anything more than maybe, because it's still pretty unsure that if you can. So if you know more, please share.
Yeah.
really curious.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Okay, so let's try to break it down. So it's around the deeper granularity, and it's associated with one of the also very interesting features of SKAN 4 that Apple called the source identifier. So the cool thing is, in older versions, SKAN had kind of to represent where the user came from. You can encode like the network name, so we know that the user came from Facebook as an example, and a campaign ID, which was just a number between 1 and 100. So basically 2-digit number. And that made things difficult for the network side because it's not a lot of room to optimize understanding, okay, how basically, how the segments basically of the users and how granular they are. So it led to, many channels saying, we can run up to 8 campaigns per account, for example, and they can't run more than that in SKAN campaigns, or that they could only show campaign level statistics. Maybe with some modeling, they could show some, ad set level data. So it really depends. But it basically, because you only have 100 options, like think even about like country level data. If you run a global campaign, like everywhere for a global audience, it's let's say you try to split it by country in the IDs, it's pretty tough to manage with only 100 values. So it's a problem for the network. So now with SKAN 4, kind of Apple redesigned it and called it the source identifier. And they basically said, again, based on kind of the backward compatible design, they're saying in the source identifier, you always get, first of all, 2 digits, which you would always have. So it's kind of like equivalent to the campaign ID that you had before. And you have the option to get an additional 2 digits, depending on volume. So if you run at a certain scale, you get more than campaign ID granularity. You get also another digit and then another digit. So total of 4 different digits. It's like 10,000 different combinations of where the user came from. So that leaves a lot of flexibility for the ad network to decide what they want to know about where the user came from. They came from a specific ad set, really, from a specific ad, maybe from specific videos that you're running. You have 10,000 different options. That's a lot, right? So that's pretty good news. Why is the maybe thing here? Why is it with the caveat? Again, the good news, bad news. So good news, I have up to 10,000 options. You can map it to different creatives, different ad sets, maybe different placements. Great. Bad news is it depends on your volume. By default, you're only going to get that 2 digits, which is the same as you have today. Only if you get to enough daily installs, and that's still a question mark, how many you need, then you would be exposed with more granularity.
So you need to pass the privacy threshold, which is now gonna be named as what, crowd anonymity or whatever. Is that
exactly
bullshit?
Yeah. Another
Jesus
kind of new terminology.
Yeah.
So
another complexity into the whole iOS. Okay,
sure,
so that's why maybe. Okay, so all right, now I understand.
So that's the maybe. So they've redesigned no more privacy thresholds, now only CRUD anonymity tiers. And the more tiers you pass, the more data that you get. That's why, like, my personal guess is probably only the large scale advertisers would be able to get more granularity because they're running at scale. And, you know, if they need more than just like a campaign level, obviously everyone needs more than a campaign level, but they would have enough volume to get more details, such as
to scale even
creative
more.
or placement or whatever. Exactly.
Okay. No. That makes total sense. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Great. Now it all clicks actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think we could spend another like 50, 100, 200 minutes, whatever, on SKAN 4.0. But as soon as we hit the adoption rate and I have more campaigns running on SKAN 4.0, I'm definitely want you back, and we will gonna discuss like what's happening in, let's say, in a couple of months. So
for sure.
Thank you very much for coming. This was really good, and I kind of got what I wanted from the, let's say, actionable point of view. So I know like what should I do, and I hope our listeners know as well. So thank you very much for listening. Eran, if our listeners want to contact you, can you give us some contact details if they have some questions?
So you can contact me at LinkedIn, Eran Friedman from Singular. Feel free to connect with me. I mean, also on the Slack channel, community Slack channels there, like, MDM and such. We have also a mobile attribution privacy Slack channel. Happy to connect there. Hit me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or even send me an email, eran@singular.net, and I'm always happy to connect and chat for hours about SKAN, So, happy to talk.
Nice. This was amazing. Thank you very much for coming. And our listeners, thank you very much for listening. Please share the podcast with your industry friends, dogs and cats. They love SKAN 4.0. Jokes aside, thank you very much. See you next time. Cheers. Bye-bye.